Okay, let's go live on YouTube, everybody.
Just tell me when we're ready to go.
We're good, Johnell.
Okay.
Good to go, Johnell.
Okay, has Greg come back?
Except for we'll
Yeah,
wait for Greg.
Let's wait for Greg. He asked for us to wait for him. Hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. Good to see everybody. Greg, just tell us when you're back. Of course, he wouldn't know that.
Yeah, I'm not here yet.
Yeah.
Well, I had the opportunity to meet someone on this group, for the very first time. So it was remarkable to see Tom Gentry in person. So just seconding your thought there, Lynn.
I got to meet Ed, my partner, in person for the first time, and that was actually pretty exciting.
Hey, Lynn, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but
Yeah.
I can't see you, I
Yeah,
don't think.
I'm having some difficulty here. I don't
Oh,
know.
we can see you.
Okay, you can now?
Yeah, you got a
Yeah,
chandelier above your head. You look like you're about 100 feet
All
tall,
right.
but other than that, you're looking good.
How about now? Is that better?
There, that is.
How's the light on me? Is it okay?
You always look good.
Thank you. Thank you. It drives me nuts. You know, the minute you are ready to use this silly thing, stuff starts happening, you know. I couldn't hear anybody. I didn't see anything. So here we are. So
Johnell, looks like Administrator Johnson has stepped back.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started if we can get the slides up. Welcome, everyone.
I don't see the slides. Okay.
They are up. Next slide, please. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for our CAG meeting today. We know that it is spring and you all have other obligations, so we continue to thank you for your dedication to advancing this project. I'll review just a few slides, just a reminder of our ASL interpretation and the effort to continue to center equity. There is an ASL interpreter in addition typically to closed captioning, and today, unfortunately, we don't have closed captioning. But to make sure the interpreter is always visible, please right-click your video and select Spotlight Video. For those watching on YouTube, when we screen share, you will be able to see the slideshow, closed captioning, and the ASL interpreter. You will still be able to hear different people speaking, but may not see them. Next slide, please. Just a reminder for our webinar participation, here are some tips. We once again want to thank you for joining us. Please join by audio, by either phone or computer, not by both. That helps to reduce the feedback. We encourage panelists to turn on your video. Obviously, it'd be preferable for us all to be in a space together, but given that we're unable to do that, to the degree that you're comfortable, we ask that you please turn on your video. Please keep your audio muted when you're not speaking. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. Next slide, please. Just a reminder for public input instructions, there will be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today around 5:45 p.m. To dial in by phone, please use 1-669-900-6833. You'll want to include the meeting ID, which is 993-5459-6043, and you'll want to use the passcode 674942. Please dial *9 to raise your hand. After you are invited to speak, please dial *6 to unmute yourself. Next slide, please. To submit a public comment, You may fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. You may also call 360-859-0494 for Washingtonians, or 503-897-9218 for Oregonians, or you may dial our 800 number at 1-888-503-6735, and please state CAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say CAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the message for them to be identified and distributed to CAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. Next slide, please. Just a reminder for our CAG members, all of this is routine for all of us, but for those who might be viewing, we always want to remember to first put relationships first, for us to keep focused on our common goal, which is to advance a river crossing option. For us to notice the power dynamics in the room. If you are someone who tend to perhaps speak up more, perhaps create opportunity for those who may not speak up as much. And if you are someone who may not speak up as often, we ask you to challenge yourself today and to really engage and lean in and participate. For us to create space for multiple truths and norms, for us to be kind and brave, that we practice examining racially biased systems and processes, and for us to look for learning. We are all together on this learning journey, and we have been together for a year. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chair Washington. Ed.
Thank you, Johnell. I'd like to say welcome to everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ed.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
All right, welcome. And today, you're going to have the opportunity to have some good discussion. We're going to be looking at what is a draft modified LPA, and how do we get there, and what is CAG's role. Third item will be CAG's Q&A and open discussion. Fourth will be CAG transit discussion and breakout sessions. And the fifth will be CAG report outs. And sixth is what next, public comment and wrap up. So I will welcome you again and just ask you all to get prepared for a lot of good discussion. And I hope that all of you will actively participate. Nobody is left out and nobody can stay out. So you got to jump right in the water with all the rest of us. That's all I have to say about the agenda. Next slide.
Ed, if I could jump in real quick, we have a new member of CAG that before we dive into our content, was hoping that we could introduce. So Dr. Karen Edwards from Clark College isn't able to make every meeting, but we are really pleased to invite Tom Sandawar to join us. And Ed and Jason and Greg and I had an opportunity to meet with Tom, and I apologize if I did not say your last name correctly, Tom, but we're glad to have you join us today and look forward to your feedback in the breakout sessions as well.
Thank you, Lisa.
Tom, welcome aboard, okay?
Thank
Ed
you.
Washington.
Just for a quick introduction, my name is Tom Sandwar, and I'm the Facilities and Capital Projects Manager for the Clark College. Great to be here and good to be the part of an Oregon and Washington resident. As a commuter, commuting every day from Oregon to Washington. So it's great to be here and bring my experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. And now we're going to turn it over to Greg to walk us through a draft modified LPA.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Community Advisory Group. So I have some comments regarding where we are at in the program, and then I will jump into to the draft modified locally preferred alternative. So we've had some tremendously meaningful events that are occurring as we speak. We know that the Washington legislature is looking at putting forward $1 billion in construction funding for the IBR program. So we know that that is something that is tremendously important to the program and to both states. So we look forward to hearing that result. We know that nothing is finalized until the governor signs it. So we will be waiting with great anticipation to see how this plays out. A week and a half ago, some of us were in Washington, D.C. to talk to the U.S. Department of Transportation about this project and about funding opportunities. Great discussion. This is prominently on their radar, and they are very, very much in tune with the needs of this area in regards to federal funding for this program. So very good discussion that happened there. We also had an opportunity to talk to congressional offices and U.S. Senate offices in both states, and very good conversation, very much supportive of getting this thing done. So this is a key critical time point. So that brings me to what is our draft modified locally preferred alternative. That is a mouthful. And we sometimes interchangeably use the term the IBR solution. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So there are three major components that you will see that we will be making recommendations for the executive steering group and the bi-state ledge to entertain. But first, these recommendations will come before the community advisory group and the equity advisory group for your input, your take on what this means for the community. So what we will be putting forward is Hayden Island Marine Drive interchanges, what that will look like. Will there be a full interchange, partial or no interchange? So we're getting very close to putting out a recommendation based on the data, based on what we have heard from the working groups and what we have heard from all of our surveys and other input to the program. So this is going to be an important step, and I know it's very, very personal for several folks who sit on the community advisory group. A second issue that we are coming down to some conclusions in the upcoming 3 to 4 weeks are on the number of auxiliary lanes. And just as a reminder, auxiliary lanes are not the through lanes that exist. We know that there are 3 northbound lanes, 3 southbound lanes through this program area. But we also know that there are 7 interchanges that is in this 5-mile stretch of roadway. Auxiliary lanes are meant to connect these interchanges and take some of the movements both on and off of the freeway in this corridor and separate it from the through traffic. So we will be coming to a recommendation on that very, very soon. We also, as part of this draft modified locally preferred alternative or IBR solution, will be putting forward a recommendation on the transit mode. So high capacity transit, the governors of each state has told us that that is key critical. And we know that the highway mode just cannot be the only mode in this corridor. So we're looking at whether this will be light rail, bus rapid transit, or a combination thereof. So these are the major components of the draft modified locally preferred alternative. Now, there are some other technical pieces, such as the bridge type and the bridge configuration. We also have talked about the North Portland Harbor Bridge replacement, but those are technical issues that in reality, those decisions are in the hands of other folks because of how this program is structured. So, but these are the key three components of the locally preferred, the modified locally preferred alternative. So once again, we will be looking to see what differences from the locally preferred alternative that was identified during the Columbia River Crossing project. And we will be making more specific recommendations and decisions. But we also know that this is what we will carry into the next step of the process, which is our federal partners have defined for us is a supplemental environmental impact statement process. So if we get the endorsement from the CAG, from all of these other folks, and their input is taken into account, and we take it up to both the executive steering group and the bi-state ledge, then we get their endorsement, then that moves us into the next step of the process. So once again, this is a starting point. We will have a very, very public process for the supplemental environmental impact statement that is prescribed in the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So this is a major milestone, but it is by far not the end. It is, once again, another step along the way. So let's go to the next slide, please. So what is CAG's role? And we have brought CAG together, and you guys have been meeting for a year, giving us advice and input into this program. So that is the expectation, is that CAG will give us feedback on the recommendations and tell us how it fits into your perspective of what the community writ large desires from this program. So we will be sharing the draft recommendations for this modified locally preferred alternative that considers all the inputs and information from EAG, CAG, and with the goal to engage the partner boards and councils beginning in May. And the program will summarize the outcomes of the boards and councils to ESG, and we will look for their endorsement. And as we get consensus from ESG, we will present that to the bi-state for their final endorsement sometime in July of this summer. So once again, CAG's role is going to be key critical in representing what the community thinks of the recommendations that we are putting forward. And you will advise us, well, we like this, we don't like that, and we will take all of those comments up the chain via Lynn and Ed, who sit on the executive steering group. Those comments will be incorporated into what we present to the executive steering group. So this is going to be an intense number of months with a lot of activities going on, a lot of presentations, both to you, to the equity advisory group, and to boards and councils. So once again, I'm going to ask for your patience in advance, because there's going to be a lot of information coming at you, and we're going to be doubling up some months for meetings, so we can get all of this information in front of you in an appropriate way. So with that, we'll go into a question and answer. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn, to walk us through some question and answers for this group to ask myself and other leaders in the IBR program.
If I can ask you to take the slides down so that we can see everybody. I'm only able to see 2 people at a time. That's unusual. There we go. Okay. Questions for Greg or others? We're going to have a little more focused breakout sessions later, but this is kind of the general questions. We're at a key turning point. We've done some really good and important work, and we're launching into kind of a double intensity time where we're going to be weighing in on the various elements of the draft modified LPA. So what questions do you have of Greg or others about the process, the timeline, or anything else?
Then there are a couple of questions.
Okay, oh, sorry, Dina, I couldn't see you were dark, but Dina, then Robin and Sam. So Dina, go ahead, unmute and.
Thanks. My question is, as we spent a tremendous amount of time, working together, the executive, steering group, coming up with recommendations, forwarding out to bi-state legislative committee, and then when you have to go through a whole other supplemental EIS process, which has another, series of public meetings and public engagement.
Yes.
How will the feedback from the public at that point be used to make changes to the project after we've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to come up with a project that would work? And so wanting to make sure that, hopefully we are coming up with a project that is already truly reflective of the community's needs. But if there are certain things that come up during the future public engagements, how will that be modified into the project?
So Dina, it's a great question, and I liken it to this project, or this part of the program defines the stadium that we're in. The next portion will define, if you want to use a baseball analogy, it'll start defining where the foul lines are, where home plate, where first and second and third base are. So we will be getting more into the details of impacts, but right now where we are now, we're defining the arena in which we're going to play. And the next step will refine it even more, and we'll be talking about impacts to the community and how those impacts can be avoided or mitigated for. So it's a diving down deeper, it's talking more, but what we will have now will be the pillars of the program defined. We'll know the number of lanes that we're going to carry forward. We'll know the high capacity transit mode. Now, there'll be more details more meat to be put on those bones as we go through the supplemental environmental impact process. But it's a continual straining or refining of what we have to get a better defined program with the impacts and the mitigations for those impacts moving forward.
Thank you. Robin and then Sam.
Greg, in your visits with the federal delegations from Oregon and Washington, while you said they were supportive, were there any major concerns that they brought up that you could share with us, and were they different between Washington and Oregon delegations?
There was some concerns brought up regarding tolling and the impacts that it will have on both areas, to make sure that tolling is done in an equitable manner for folks who have to cross the bridge every day. So we spoke to looking nationally and internationally at tolling programs and equitable practices. So that was a key thing that we heard from both sides of the river. We also heard that, this is maybe once in a generation that the stars are aligning with money in Washington, D.C. And the way the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is written has some key things that align perfectly with this program. And we don't know what that may look like 2-4 years from now. So we were implored to strike while the iron is hot and get this thing moving forward. So that was the common sentiment that we heard on both sides of the river from the US senators as well as the Congress people.
Thank you. Sam, and then Marcus.
Yeah, I apologize if this was brought up previously, but one of the questions I have gotten and I didn't know the answer to is between the construction and ultimately it being done, what will happen to the existing traffic and the bridge and so forth, meaning that will the impact during the construction, whether it takes a year or 2 years or 3 years, I don't know exactly how many years it's going to take. Will there be just a single span available for traffic, or will both spans be available throughout the entire construction? And this may be too much into the weeds and so forth, but I wish I could give a better answer than I don't know.
Sam, it's a great question, and it plays into a number of different things. How we maintain traffic is going to be key to helping the economy of this area still function in a reasonable way. So we've talked about building the new bridge spans west of the existing bridge and shifting traffic as appropriate so we can build other things. So we think that it's going to take for the overall program to get built out, including transit, including all of the things that are necessary. We think it's going to be a 6 to 7 year process. So starting in 2025, ending in 2031 or 32. But we are aiming to keep during peak times 3 lanes in each direction. Wow. So that's going to be a challenge, but that's what we're aiming for, so as to not harm the economy of this region by overloading or shifting people to different roadways or areas.
Thank you so much. I will assure people who were curious. Thank you.
Marcus?
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah. First, I apologize. I missed the last meeting, but I know that the equity analysis was presented at the last CAG meeting. And so I was curious, and I asked a couple of people who were there and I couldn't get an answer, but the transit, is it going to be going to Clark College, or is there a decision that's been made on that? Because I know there was some elements of that presented in the equity analysis. And I know there was discussion about stopping at Evergreen versus going all the way to Clark. And I just wanted to put a bid in there and say, if it goes to Clark, that's good, because that'll serve more of the equity-based communities better. But if not, then I just want to know where, I guess I just want to know what the status is and where we are with that.
So a final decision on the termini of what's going to be high capacity transit has not been finally decided yet. The equity analysis is one piece of the puzzle. There are other factors that have to be taken into account, such as cost, such as impacts of going further or stopping short. So those things are still being looked at, and we're hoping towards the end of this month, Marcus, to have that decision or that recommendation ready to come before this group so it can be talked about in more depth. We're going to do some talking about it, the options, and try to narrow down some of the transit options. We think that some are at this point not feasible to move forward in the process, but we have not gotten to the final. But I want to caution everybody, and you've heard me say this before, there is no perfect solution. We know that there are trade-offs, that there are things that have to be taken into account to get a final product that can be acceptable for the entire region. We cannot afford to have this program fail again. And so we have to be willing to look hard at some of the choices that we have in front of us to make sure that does not happen on this program. But more information coming later in this discussion about transit and a narrowing down of the choices, and then further into the month, probably our next meeting, we will even narrow that down and hopefully have a recommendation that you guys will be able to look at and react to as we put it in front of you.
Thank you. Bill, then Sherry.
And I think you just answered my question, Greg, but can we get in the next week or so or two before that meeting you were just talking about, can we get a listing of what the what we have to do in order? We've already talked about transit, and we've been told by the various government agencies there has to be some kind of a high capacity transit. There's a number of things that have to be done that we need to keep into consideration as we think of other alternatives for what we need to do in the long run. I'm not explaining it very well, but is there a way to list the givens that we have to do, and then what other things we can discuss?
We definitely can do that. I work with our co-chairs and Jason and our facilitators to make sure that you guys have a clear understanding of what's going to be asked of you. So we're going to be asking you to weigh in on recommendations from the IBR team on high capacity transit mode, on the number of auxiliary lanes, and on the Hayden Island interchange issue. So those are the three basic things that we're going to be looking for your advice back to our team on. We're going to give you scenario, and we're going to say, tell us what you think. Tell us what the part of the community that you represent, how they feel about this. And we will take that into account as we move this further up the line to the executive steering group, as well as boards and councils, and eventually the bi-state legislative team. So Bill, I hope that answers your question.
I was going to say, just to clarify, that's in this short term. There may be other tasks that the CAG will be visiting on, but that's kind of the run to April 28th is those three items. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
That helps, because I keep thinking or hearing high capacity transit, then I heard walking and rolling alternatives. We have to have different freight alternatives, all those kinds of things we need to consider. But what are the ones that are already given that we're going to have to do, like the transit?
So the issue of active transportation, in any scenario, we're going to have a very high capacity active transportation facility built. So as we go into the supplemental environmental, we'll start nailing down more details, but it's not something that you guys are going to have to say yay or nay to, because that's already baked into this cake. But as we go forward after July, we'll start getting into more details that we're going to ask you guys to look at. What connections need to be made? What gaps are missing in the system? Things like that we're going to be asking the community to weigh in and give us guidance on.
Thank you. Sherry?
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for making this so clear, the expectations that this community advisory group will be providing feedback on. I think it's helpful for us to know what we're going to be expected to communicate to the communities that we work with and give feedback in these areas. But I'm kind of wondering, what about the bridge design and how is that process being handled? Is there another advisory group that will be key in the design of the bridge?
So, and I'll take that in two parts. So the aesthetics piece of it is definitely going to be something that we will be asking the community advisory group to weigh in into the future. One of the things that that's becoming very technical is how the bridge will be situated. Will it be a side-by-side or stack? Now, we'd love to turn that issue over to you guys. But part of the problem is it has some technical ramifications that if we select one, we may not be able to tie into interchanges properly, or we may be encroaching onto 4F properties, such as the Port of Vancouver. So some of these things are more technically driven. So I'd love to say I'd love to have you guys in that room, but hell, I'm not even in that room because the guys are telling me that this is coming down to some very, very technical ways that you can tie in interchanges. So we are going to present to you what we found and why we have moved it in a certain direction, but they're all totally technical problem-solving issues. And some of it relate to the maintenance of traffic and things of that nature. So, but you will get a chance to weigh in as far as the bridge type, the aesthetics. That will be something that we will be asking the CAG to give us advice and weigh in on.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one more question. We have additional discussion items, but if there's anything else, especially some of you who maybe haven't asked a question, is there something that your communities are asking of you that now's a great time to try and clarify? Okay, one of my friends is a minister and she taught me that letting a long pregnant pause go is a good way to elicit feedback. So I'm trying to emulate that imperfectly. All right, well, let's move on to, I think at this point, Johnell, I'm passing the ball over to you.
I think is that accurate? Okay. I think we're up for our first presentation. Jason, remind me of that.
So
this is the breakout session.
We are going to move into the breakout. So
right.
Lisa.
Oh,
I would love to. We just did a little shuffling around.
That was very smooth.
We got to be nimble. Lynn is just making sure I'm engaged. So
right, yeah. All right. So we had mentioned at our last CAG meeting that we hope to spend some time talking about the Marine Drive, the Hayden Island Marine Drive interchange options. And what we realized was, given the content that was presented and the time that it took to present the transit information and the equity in transit analysis, that we needed to make sure that we spent time today really listening. So you heard from Greg, and I think this session has been helpful to understand what we're asking, when we're asking, for you to weigh in and to provide us input, and how that fits into the overall program schedule. And so what we really want to do is transition into a period of a breakout session where we spend time talking about what you heard at the last CAG meeting, what questions, what feedback you have. We really just did not allow enough time for that to occur. So that is what we'll focus on today. And then we will, at our next meeting, spend a little bit of time with the Marine Drive Hayden Island. So we haven't forgotten that topic. It is one of the critical pieces as we move forward. But we felt like having the time today where we listened was critically important as we move through our schedule. So with that, Jason, do you want to go ahead and just bring up the slide so we can tee up the breakout session? There'll be 4 different breakout sessions, and we promise we have some technical expertise in each of those breakout sessions. So you'll have the opportunity to ask an engineer or ask a planner and be able to use the time and space to be able to dive into maybe those questions that you just did not have enough time to explore in the larger group setting. We will ask for you to come back and debrief what you covered in the small group conversation in the breakout session. So I want to remind folks, if you could go ahead and move to the next slide, that we did spend quite a lot of time last spring, about a year ago, really defining the values and priorities that were very reflective of the community engagement efforts that also occurred in the broader community during that same time period in spring of 2021. And through that process and the work with the community advisory group, the values and priorities were established. And we reached consensus on these values and priorities. For those that might be tuning in via YouTube, to find the community advisory group's values and priorities, you simply go to the website, the IBR program website, under advisory groups, under community advisory group, and then the charter and key materials link will provide you a copy of those values. We did send those out to the community advisory group, again, that link, so you have it handy. Also, on that same webpage, you can find the presentation from our last community advisory group meeting, which Jason sent out as well to the CAG. I mentioned those 2 documents so that that is the content in which we will create this conversation in the breakout session, so that the public has those links handy. When we come back from the breakout session, you have a better idea of how we were organizing the conversation within those small groups, and so that the CAG has those handy in case you need to go back and take a look. Just a reminder, some of those key community advisory group values and priorities include all modes of transportation to increase capacity of river crossing, that it's essential to effective and safely move people, goods, and services. That congestion was a value and a priority for this group and the community. Informed, data-driven decision-making, bi-state cooperation, economic empowerment, transportation facilities that reflect the needs of all ages and abilities, remove barriers, including language to access, and ensure availability to transportation choices, cost effectiveness, centering equity, cultural and historical heritage and resources protected and honored, climate change, natural resources, and community engagement. So as we move into these breakout sessions, we ask that you consider which of the CAG values and priorities should be emphasized as transit recommendations are identified. So this is really the portion of the meeting where we spend time talking about high capacity transit. So with that, I think we'll head into those breakout sessions, and we've been working together for over a year now, so you know how this goes. We just kind of magically move into other rooms. Brent and Jason make this happen for us. And once you're in that follow-on room, you might see that we have additional program team members. We have someone who is taking notes. We have expert, technical subject matter expert that will be available. And then we also have some of our partners. So just a reminder that the program has 8 important partners that show up, that are a part of all of the work and the effort that goes into bringing to you the presentations that we do. And those partners are likely going to be in many of those breakout sessions. So you'll have a mix of individuals able to hopefully not only listen, but be able to offer some answers if you have questions. And if we are unable to answer those questions in those small groups, then we will come back and make sure to provide you with those answers before our next meeting. So with that, Jason, is there anything that I missed?
I think you covered it, except we do have one second question too that after this, and it is on the screen as well. So that is what aspects of the transit investment best align with our values and priorities. So we would love to hear your thoughts on that as well when we get into our groups.
And we will answer both those questions in the same group. So there won't be a bringing everyone back together, debriefing, and then heading back into those breakout sessions. So just think about how you might respond to both questions, and we want to cover both in the time that we have together.
And Jason, just to clarify, 30 minutes still?
You know, we can do 35. We're a few minutes in front.
Perfect. So opening all the rooms now, and ASL interpreters will stay here. Thank you. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Britt, you weren't talking to Sam Churchill, were you?
Yes.
Oh, I'm fine.
Were you in a breakout room, Sam?
No, I wasn't. I was out. I went to something else and I came back. I'm just a citizen, Hayden Island.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Brent, I don't think that was 35 minutes. We still needed more time in our session. That felt like it went very fast.
I agree with you, Lisa. It did go fast, but but it's suddenly we were down to 3 minutes. But I don't know. I think we certainly started before 5 o'clock because we were a few minutes in front. But if there are more conversations and questions, I'm sure we can ask them in front of everybody.
Absolutely. I just was simply meaning we had quite a healthy conversation in our breakout room and could have kept chatting. So hopefully others felt like the time was worthwhile as well. And this is the time, I'm looking for Lynn. This is the time when we certainly are looking for each of those breakout sessions to provide a bit of a debrief or a summary, or maybe some key points that you heard or discussed in your breakout rooms. We did not elect or volunteer anyone to do that debrief in the session that I was in. Not sure if anyone wants to weigh in, or Lynn, if you want to call on each group and we move through that, or if you'd like me to keep.
No, well, I'll start with Salome because she said she doesn't believe in voluntolding people. So if I can just say, she's got everybody on the call wants to be in her group, but since she volunteered, maybe she could start and then we'll just look for additional volunteers. So Salome, if you would do your best to make us all sound really articulate with everything we said, we would all appreciate it.
I will try my best. English is not my first language, so if I could do it a different language, I would definitely make sure you sound articulate, but I'll do the best that I can with English. So in our group, we had a very lively discussion in regards to the values and priorities. And in our discussion, we really talked a good portion about how the values and priorities are intersectional and they rely upon each other for there to be the best option available. We talked about how some of these values and priorities are kind of the answers to each other and how you get that. And we also discussed about how if we are specifically talking about values and priorities as a lens to come to transit investments, that there are definitely some things that we need to take into consideration. Some of those things was around equity in transit investments. There was some discussion brought up around we need to make sure that we are thinking about those with different mobility when it comes to our transit investments as a value aligned with our centering equity. There was making sure that as we talk about transit investments, that we do not lose equity as a focus, and talking about how in previous experiences that we've had, cost effectiveness or congestion or other things can kind of make equity fall by the wayside if it isn't one of the top 3 priorities, and how we need to make sure that equity stays a top priority. Another thing that we talked about was the ability for mass transit to be the answer that meets all of our values and priorities, and saying that if we build a bridge for mass transit, then we will have met the needs of all of our priorities and values. Another thing that we spoke about was a conversation around, in particular, informed data-driven decision-making, and how that is something that will need to be super transparent. It'll need to be something that we look at through the lens of not in a vacuum, but within the larger context. And also making sure that if we are basing our decisions on data, that data is accessible to everyone, that data is put into context, and that data is fact checkable. We also talk about that congestion and that all modes of transportation value are one and the same to a lot of us. And that as we move forward with our transit options and investments, that we look to all of these different values to really push forward a solution and making sure that equity stays in the center, and that we think about those who use transit and those who are in the area to make an informed decision alongside our values and priorities. And then there was a mention that we need to make sure and emphasize that if we do use data, that data is fact checkable, that it is reliable, and that others can find it as well.
Thank you. You managed to take a lot of conversation and make it sound very coherent and organized. We appreciate it. What group would like to report next? I don't know who the leaders were, so if you can just unmute and go, that would be terrific.
Happy to go for our group. Right off the bat, something I really appreciated from Sherry is she pointed out that the bullet under the values and priorities that says congestion, we want to be clear that congestion is not the value or priority, that congestion relief is. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page there. So we talked about, there was some overlap between what Salome shared from her group as far as really emphasizing a data-driven process, and that we as program staff, we probably are erring a little bit too much on the side of not sharing enough data with this group. So more data is good, especially around the important decisions, and this one around transit investment really being a crucial one. We also talked about the importance of this being an efficient, that the transit option being an efficient and useful and attractive option for folks, including those who might be driving from North Clark County and doing a park and ride situation and being able to, say, work while they're taking their transit ride, and thinking about what do transfers, how do those impact the efficiency and the attractiveness, and what does that mean for what the investment looks like. We talked about one thing that was a question that came up was, are there differences between, say, BRT and LRT in terms of the potential seismic resilience of the bridge, which I thought was really insightful. It's something I personally had not thought about. And so that is obviously as a key piece of this project, something we really need to think about. Let's see, a couple others. Let's see, we talked about climate change and how important that value and priority is as part of this whole thing. Let's see, I believe that is pretty much it. But group, please add anything that I missed.
Well, we did also have, I think, some overlap with Salome in terms of the equity and see, I see equity and economic empowerment and the removing the barriers, all kind of aspects of the same issues. And all of those can also be sort of part of the question of efficiency. So how do you make efficiency work for all people? So it's just a little more in depth on that point.
Thank you, Tom. Absolutely.
Thank you. Some overlap, some differences. We have two more groups, so I'm looking for volunteers.
I see Lisa smiling because it comes down to her or I. I will certainly ask.
Weighted step forward. Go right ahead.
Like everybody in my group, please feel free to jump in as well. I certainly don't want to misrepresent what our members would say, but I will certainly give it a shot. And like Lisa said at the beginning, also, we were still in the middle of conversation. So it really, that 35 minutes went fast, and it was a very robust conversation. Third verse same as the first, but I won't say only worse, but just as good. The very first comments out of us were about data-driven decisions as well. And we also hit on the need to, the need and recognize that data does not stop, or the program doesn't stop collecting data or asking for decisions to be made about data at the LPA, right? That continues to move on into the future. And then the very next comment after data-driven decisions was emphasizing bi-state cooperation, and how that was certainly an issue that froze us or froze the previous planning effort. And so really, and not only by state cooperation, because then later on we talked about local cooperation on both sides of the river. So the transit agencies, the cities, all the way, not just, of course, the states, but then all the way up into the congressional delegation as well, to making sure that everybody had support of this program. So that was a big focus of ours as well. I will point out, because I did point out to our group, and I think it is even coming clear with the three groups so far saying data-driven decisions. When you saw that list of the 12 values and priorities that was on the screen, and I can pull it up real quick, they are listed in the order of how you all voted back in January. So the number one highest priority was all modes of transportation. And then, as Jake pointed, number two, it's congestion relief, not congestion. But the third most important value that this group voted on when we did that polling in January was informed and data-driven decisions. And great to see that is coming through in all of your discussions. So, I think that is something certainly that the program likes to hear, and certainly I know our ESG folks will like to hear as well. So we also, we talked about the mode of transit. Does it have to be just one, and what will it look like? And Kelly, thank you for answering that question that said that it does not have to be just one. Kelly, would you like to kind of answer that question for me? Because I know we had a little bit of a discussion about that.
Yeah. And Rebecca could chime in as well. But essentially what we were saying is that as we've had an opportunity to think about this investment, it's always with a lens towards the existing system and thinking how this new investment can really maximize both what's on the ground now and create synergies in terms of the built environment and connections, really with an eye towards existing riders and future riders, and what is going to make this an attractive option for folks that are moving within the corridor.
Thank you. Rebecca, anything to add to that?
Nope, Kelly said it great. I guess I'll just share that, from the city of Vancouver perspective, we just want to find an option that supports moving essentially connecting people via transit who want to take that option to the most places, and sort of what's the most robust way we can connect together, existing BRT, TriMet's existing system, C-Trans express route system for folks coming from farther north, and really just maximize the way that all fits together.
Thank you. We also talked about building a system that for the future. And I know that's been a topic that we talked about months and months ago. In one of the former jam boards, I remember Future. We talked about considering options that do not exist yet, or we don't have the technology yet. And Rebecca, certainly you could chime in again from the city of Vancouver, as the future is now. She was talking about, but we want to make sure that we build a system for future opportunities that we might not have the ability to do at the moment. And then the final kind of larger piece of our conversation was around just increasing the bike and pedestrian friendliness and access to bike and ped. And not just on the bridge, we know that is an issue, but also access to the bridge and off the bridge, making it a little bit simpler, a little less convoluted. And even as Greg said, we know that trips can last longer than the corridor and 15 miles, but the bike and ped needs to also think not just from riverbank to riverbank, but where do those people go, and how does we make it easier to get to their destination once they're off the bridge? We know we've got a few people in our group who have personal experiences with that it can be tough just to cross the bridge. So those were the highlights of our group, and I welcome anybody in that group to please speak up if there's more.
I just thought it was very helpful to have Rebecca from the city there to give us some comments and to clarify some things, and that may have been perceptions before. So thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks for letting me join.
We have one more group, but amongst all of the Hollywood Squares, I don't know who you are. So if the remaining group could identify, and if you're not willing to, maybe just call out one of your buddies.
Why don't I go ahead and lean in here? So this was the group that I was a part of, and given our time, I think I'll probably be able to kind of summarize pretty quickly. And then if there are members of the group that I was in that wants to add any additional details, please feel free to do so. I'm not going to repeat the other comments that were already made. Many of those were mentioned in our breakout session as well. There are a couple that I thought were important for us to share in the broader group. And one of those comments is really around our community values and priorities, an appreciation that we spent the time to go through and put that together, but a question as to what they mean. So the need for a little bit more definition. So when we say congestion, how will we measure that this replacement meets that litmus test? So I thought that was an interesting perspective that we should take a look at and make sure on the actual document that if there are definitions we can pull out and be able to bring back to the group and be clear in our communications about what we mean when we use these words. Another key aspect that I thought was important to share, we had quite a bit of discussion about the impact of freight and freight in addition to cars and moving bikes and pedestrians, and just the idea of how all of these work together. But there was a comment really around the footprint and size of the bridge and what that larger footprint might mean to the cultural and historical impacts, both in terms of the land on either side of the river and then within the river. And so I thought that was an important element. It is included in our values, but I hadn't heard that particular piece be brought up as we start to think about each of these components of the modified LPA. That historical and cultural piece is also part of that centering equity. And then certainly an appreciation that we do have an equity advisory group and how they'll weigh in on this particular topic as well, given that equity is one of the community advisory group values and priorities. So I think I did that in 2 minutes. So if there are others that really can add additional details or feedback from the conversation that I didn't share, please feel free to lean in now. It sounds like we don't have anyone signed up for public comment yet. So my rush to get through this piece to make sure we have time for anyone that might be wanting to provide public comment may not be as urgent. So the others that were in my group that want to add anything, want to say something?
This is Bill. I just wanted to jump in because I threw it out at the very last minute. But how does the bridge and all of the transit affect the transit on I-205? And what kind of synergies are there? What's it gonna? Are we gonna move more people over to 205, or is 205 gonna move people to I-5, or are they gonna be synergistic and be even smoother? I don't know if I'm sure there's the data on that, but I'm not familiar with it. And I did throw out one that is, I don't know if it's anecdotal or what, but I had heard, and I think Lisa concurred with me, I had heard that the center lane of the center part where people walk and ride bikes over I-205 was originally planned to have a transit lane going through there, whether it's a track or a lane in the middle of the bridge that goes through there. So I mean, I've ridden my bike over there once or twice. I thought, this sure seems like a nice area for people to run a train through versus bikes, but then you'd have to have other places for the bikes and walkers to go. But anyway, the effect on 205 and how that hits the whole system is what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I wasn't in your group, Lisa, but I just want to say I've been listening to the listening sessions with the various Indigenous groups and the profound impact of that river, I don't think can be overstated. And that was, when you shone a light on that, I was just thinking about that in light of all of those listening sessions. So that's been an important investment, I think.
I think our co-chair, Mr. Washington, who was in my group, may have something to add as well.
I don't have anything to add. I'm going to mess with somebody in a nice way. But Vicky was waxing elegantly when she had to get off the mic, and let her. I'd like to hear what she was saying was really good. So Vicky, I think it was Vicky. Vicky, if you have why don't you say something? It's good conversation that we had to leave her. So I just want to see the finishing statements from her.
Well, actually, it was just just trying to play Kelly and redo the high takeaways, the kind of the key takeaways from Kelly's presentation last time, because we are all busy, and I was just trying to kind of have the group remember kind of just those high takeaways, that there is just an incredible demand for transit, and that both LRT and BRT operate very well. And I think also what Rebecca and Kelly said in this larger group is that we are really leveraging the systems already in place, those transit systems in Vancouver, whether it's the BRT, and express bus, as well as TriMet system, and really trying to make that the best investment that we can in that high capacity to connect those two. So yeah, and then we all got whisked away back into this larger group. So just playing Kelly.
Thank you, Lisa, for letting me hop in there.
Okay, well, Lynn, I think that wraps up our breakout sessions, and I think I may be on deck to move us through. I'm seeing Jason nod his head. Any public commenters signed up at this point? Brent, okay, well, let's talk about what's next then. The next slide includes the other two key components of the draft modified LPA that will be seeking input and feedback from the community advisory group. So as promised, Hayden Island Marine Drive, that's on deck for next meeting, which is actually only 2 weeks away. And then we'll spend some time talking about number of auxiliary lanes. And then you'll see a recommendation on the draft modified LPA we'll discuss. And our hope is to seek some consensus and feedback. Again, as Greg mentioned, the idea is that Lynn and Ed will be able to take a message back to the ESG table from the community advisory group as to their feedback, as to your feedback on the modified LPA. There are several.
I don't know why that slide is blank.
Well, I had, being a bit old school, printed the set of slides, so I actually have it in front of me. And the next program meetings, we have an equity advisory group meeting on March 14th from 5:30 to 7:30. We have our executive steering group meeting March 17th from 10 until noon. We have our bi-state legislative committee meeting March 23rd from 9 until 12. And then we're back at this. So community advisory group, March 24th, 4 to 6 p.m. And then 2 weeks after that, another community advisory group meeting, April 14th, 4 to 6 p.m. So we know that we're sending information to you just right before the meeting. We hope to be able to give you more time to be able to review information so that you're ready to participate in a conversation. We broke out the topics so that there was enough time to present, as well as create space for dialogue, discussion, and the opportunity for you to provide feedback. And with that, it is our time for public comment. And so I just want to verbally communicate again ways to provide public comment. To make a live comment via phone, we ask that you dial 1-669-900-6833 or 1-408-638-90968. Our meeting ID is 993-5459-6043, and passcode is 674942. Raise *9 to raise your hand. Brent, still no one signed up at this point? Okay. Seeing that we don't have anyone that's calling in to provide us public comment, we also want to let you know that if you'd like to send a public comment to the community advisory group, we do send out the public comments to the group to review. And you may do so by either filling out a comment form on the program website or emailing your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with CAG Public Comment in the subject line. You can also give us a call, and you can reach us at 360-859-0494, 503-897-9218, or 888-503-6735. And again, that we ask that you please make sure that you include CAG public comment so we can make sure that your comments are provided to the community advisory group directly as we receive them. All right. I'd like to just pause for a minute and see if our program administrator, if Greg, if you have any other final wrap up comments, and then pass it back off to Ed.
You know, I do have some final comments, and I appreciate the exercise that we went through. We were in a very robust breakout group, had some great conversation. And the one thing that I do, I want to remind the entire group is we are getting close to moving this to the next level. And there are some key decisions that are yet to be made. And the thing that I've said all along and that I will keep saying to everyone is perfect cannot be the enemy of good. And in this case, very good. Whatever we build here is going to be so much tremendously better than what exists now. And we'll have the ability to build on in future generations. So this is, we are on a good path. And I want to remind people that when we started 20 months ago, or when I started 20 months ago, getting to this point was not assured. So thank you for all the hard work that you've put in. And we've got a couple more months of intense work to get us to that next phase, but we're going to get there. So thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Ed, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share to wrap us up? Or Lynn, if there's anything else that you'd like to share, since we don't have public comment, we just have a few more minutes, that if there is anything that either of you would like to share.
Ed, we can't hear you. There you go.
I would give Lynn the opportunity to say something, and then I'll be happy to close it up after that.
Oh, thank you, Ed. You're always so gracious. I just want to say thank you for hanging in with us. It's a little bit lumpy. We're doing our best. We're going as fast as we can. We're pedaling, but it's not smooth. It's, starts and stops, but that's part of being transparent, is that things aren't always perfect. And so I just want to thank people for understanding that we're doing our best to share information as it's available and to the level it's available. So thanks for hanging in. With that, Ed, take it away.
Yeah, I would just like to say, Greg and Lisa is always with us, but thank you so very much, Greg, for the insight and the depth of your expressions. this evening. And then I want to thank all of the members of the CAG for bearing with us as we go through this journey. And we know that the only way we're going to get through it is with all of your help. And just want to thank you so very, very much. And have a wonderful evening. And we'll see you next time around. Take care. Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.